Open worlds are massive, explorable, alternate realities, and many of them are very, very good. Not all of them. That's what we're looking at today. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 8 games that messed up trying to be open world. Starting off at number 8, it's Mafia 3. While the first 2 games in the Mafia series flirted with the idea of being open world, it wasn't until Mafia 3 that the series went all in. After the amazing first few hours, which were actually very linear, when the game dumps you into a fictional version of New Orleans and tasks you with systematically dismantling basically all of the organized crime. There's a lot this game wants you to do, and it gets really tedious really quick. The actual main missions remain pretty good, and if you follow along with those, that's a good experience. However, the massive amount of padding you have to wade through to get to them, that's annoying. If you didn't have to do basically everything before the game would let you continue, then it wouldn't be nearly as much of a drag, but for whatever reason, you literally have to clear out all the main crime spots on the map, which boil down to repetitive sneaking and shooting sections in small areas before moving on to the next thing. The frustrating thing about it is that outside all of the boring busy work, it's a solid game with a really interesting story and a very cool world, but all of the tedious, stereotypical open world elements they added into this game really drag it down. If they just made this game linear like the first 2, it probably would have been much, much better. And number 7 is Mirror's Edge Catalyst. The first Mirror's Edge game was absolutely awesome. It was a stylish parkour action game with a unique perspective. They managed to do parkour in first person pretty much for the first time. And it was set in this amazingly stylistic, detailed, unique city environment. It had one big problem though. It was about a 2-hour game, and then there wasn't much left to do but run time trials. Now, with the sequel, Mirror's Edge Catalyst, DICE made the game an open world in an effort to make the setting bigger. And while the game has its fans, there are a lot of people, myself included, who believe it is a lesser follow-up to the original. Now, that doesn't mean I don't like it. I like it. Most of it, anyways. But a lot of the open world additions to the gameplay are awkward. The best parts in Catalyst are the best parts of the original. The linear levels that really let you let loose with the moveset that you have. But another major issue it had, at least at release, was bugs. Like, there were a lot of rough edges for a game that has the word edge in its title, specifically a mirror's edge, implied to be an incredibly straight, perfect edge. No, they were rough. They were rough in this game's release. And the original didn't have those rough edges. It was kind of an experimental game that worked really smoothly, so it's kind of easy to chalk those issues up to the open world structure. Now, again, I want to stress it's not a bad game, but it lost some of the charm that the original Mirror's Edge had in being such a well-done, polished experience, even if a little short. And number 6 is Mass Effect Andromeda. Now, the line between RPG and open world game is often a blurry one, but I feel like it's hard to call the 3 games in the original Mass Effect trilogy open world. They're pretty linear and too mission-based really to be called anything other than RPGs, while on the other hand, Mass Effect Andromeda hits a lot of the open world boxes. There's massive open planets to explore, quests to take on from locals, and repetitive collectibles and objectives dotted all over the map. There's no singular world to explore, but each planet's big enough that it pretty much qualifies, and I don't think any of that would really be a huge issue, except that it's really boring. In some ways, the gameplay is a little more interesting than the linear gameplay of the original series. Like, the addition of a jetpack makes the combat way better. It's more fluid, and it's certainly more action-packed and varied. But the actual open world stuff you do are just really, really dull. The missions you get from locals are pretty much universally the basic, hey, go get this thing and bring it back to me, because I am a local who doesn't want to go out to the area that I would know better than you. You, this random stranger, can you do this for me? You probably don't know anything about that area, but go ahead. Please do this for me. And it's like a flower or something. Just like with Mirror's Edge Catalyst, this isn't a bad game per se. It perhaps contained a larger share of faults than Mirror's Edge Catalyst did. That did make it, a lot less good than the originals. But I don't want to call it terrible, just filled with a lot of boring content. And number 5 is Prince of Persia from 2008. The Sands of Time trilogy was about as linear as they come, outside of a little bit of backtracking in Warrior Within, so it makes sense that Ubisoft would want to do something different when they rebooted the series back in 2008. Instead of being linear, the new game was completely open world. You could explore any of the 4 main areas in any order you wanted, and, well, that wasn't all that changed. Time powers were gone, which, that was what Prince of Persia was about. Traversal was greatly simplified, and combat was entirely reworked. Also, you couldn't die. To say the game was a massive departure from the originals would be an understatement, and while it's much more open than the original games, the depth just isn't there. Pretty much all you do is go around, collect light seeds, and heal all the fertile grounds, and then there's some bosses, and that's it. So while the world is beautiful and a lot of the dialogue is actually pretty charming, the game feels bare bones. It really just feels like a collection of arenas that are strung together by climbing sections, and the environment really just doesn't even matter after a while. There's stuff to like about the game, the art design's top notch, but the actual gameplay isn't really that engaging. At number 4 is Metal Gear Survive. Not technically the first open world game in the series, Metal Gear Solid 5 is, but bear with me. 5 has a lot of open world elements, but it's kind of more of a hybrid. The open world stuff is kind of there to enhance the mission-based gameplay, and that's the focus of the game. It's really about selecting missions from a screen and going to that place. Not really a traditional open world game in the strict definition of the word. Not that the world itself didn't have its vistas to explore and views to see, but Survive is a lot closer. You're stuck on a map, you have to explore. You follow markers to junk, you have to collect and build up your base and, survive. It's a fine concept for a game. There's a lot of games that follow this exact line of thought, but this game is heavily flawed and missing a lot of elements that make Metal Gear Metal Gear. Like, for one, it has none of the classic characters. It's set in some alternate dimension with crystal zombies, and it's very boring. They basically copy-pasted Metal Gear Solid 5's gameplay onto a bog standard survival game. So while the controls are amazing, everything feels awkward and unnecessarily confusing. So it's not that fun to play. Like a lot of games on this list, the open world elements feel lazy and tacked on to drag the game out, rather than because they thought, wow, an open world would give us a lot more possibilities and afford us the canvas to paint a much broader picture. No, it's just more, and not necessarily more good stuff. And number 3 is Homefront The Revolution. Alright, the first Homefront wasn't a masterpiece or anything. It was functional, but it was mostly an uninteresting Call of Duty knockoff. It did at least achieve what it was trying to do, though. With Homefront The Revolution, they got really ambitious. Instead of a linear 3-hour campaign, they decided they wanted to make Far Cry 3, and it is not great. Visually, a lot of it actually still looks pretty great, but the gameplay itself is super rough, especially on consoles. Maybe my biggest issue is actually the controls. They're sluggish and unresponsible in a way that's kind of hard to describe. For a shooter, movement and aiming should feel really snappy and responsive, not like you're controlling the game from a tub of molasses, which is honestly what it feels like sometimes. The open world stuff actually isn't that bad most of the time. Most of it's pretty standard, though. The city environment does add some additional layers of exploration that games like Far Cry 3 and 4, set mostly in the wilderness, they don't have those things. So there's caches to collect, safe houses to unlock, strongholds to take down, and I wouldn't call any of it bad per se, but the way the game feels just drags the whole thing down. This game didn't exactly damage the franchise or anything, though. Homefront was already dead in the water past the first game, but this definitely wasn't the revolution that the series needed. At number 2 is Dynasty Warriors 9. Oh my god. Do you remember when this game came out? I was unfortunately the one who had to do the before you buy because I love the Warriors games. But after 9 games, this series finally made the switch to open world, and wow, not pretty. The Dynasty Warriors games are all about overpowered hero characters taking on gigantic armies, and that basic premise has served the series well for a really long time. But during development for number 9, some genius decided what the series needed was a bunch of boring MMO stuff between the battles. That's basically what Dynasty Warriors 9 is, an offline version of the most boring, basic, nothing special, stereotypical MMO you've ever played. The environments are beyond dull. Everything's so spread out, it takes so long to get to anything, and most of your objectives are just fetch quests, and To call that tedious, I think, would be nice. After a while, this game feels oppressive. I was so mad at Koei Tecmo for this game when it came out. Like, when you actually do get to the hacking and slashing, things improve, but the battles are actually less interesting rather than more taking place on an open world map, because everything just happens in an empty field. It's boring and shockingly ugly. There's some ambitious and interesting ideas. None of them are executed well, though, and it's not worth slogging through all the boring crap to see them. In all seriousness, the idea of Dynasty Warriors in an open world sounds plausible, because you think, oh, huge armies on a huge open world. The battles could be so intense. That is not how it worked out. And finally, Driver with a 3 instead of an E. When it comes to infamous flops, few games flopped harder than Driver 3. What was supposed to be the ultimate Grand Theft Auto 3 killer ended up being, Driver 3. You know? This game is better remembered as a punchline than as an actual game, which maybe is a little unfair, but when I said that, you laughed. I laughed. I mean, it might be a little unfair to the game because there were some ambitious ideas, but they didn't really pan out. Like the fact the game had not one but 3 different cities to explore, but the bugs and the general jankiness of the gameplay really drag it down. That's the biggest issue with the game, actually. The open world nature of it isn't necessarily the problem, it's the bugs and the controls. Now, that said, if they had not made an open world game, they probably could have spent that time on the bugs and the controls, but still, playing the game feels stiff, feels unresponsive, and almost always feel like you're gonna crash. The game literally feels like it's being barely held together, and that's kind of what killed it. It was too ambitious for its own good and was rushed out to meet a deadline. I'm not saying the open world stuff is great or anything, it's actually pretty bare bones, but that's not really what messed up the game. Just being an open world game did. It added complexity and made a game that was too big to make in the amount of time they had to make it. That is what killed Driver with a 3 for an E. That's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter, Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time, right here on gameranx.